Thank you very much, everyone, for coming along. And I'm overwhelmed that we've got someone from Newfoundland tuning in from all those thousands of miles away. That's fantastic. I'm Joe Lindley. I'm a senior research fellow here at Lancaster University. I work in ImaginationLancaster, which is our design-led research lab, and that's within design here at Lancaster. And this is the very first of a new series of talks called Future Design Leaders, where we're engaging with people who've graduated through our programs to find out what they're up to and talk about their studies here at Lancaster. So today we have Sahana, and thank you so much for coming along, Sahana. Would you like to just quickly introduce yourself, tell us a bit about your background, and let us know what you've been up to since graduating from Lancaster?
Hi, Joe. Thank you so much. I'm Sahana. I did my undergrad in architecture and I worked for a couple of years in the industry. And then I realized I wanted to do something different and get understand more about the management side of things as opposed to just design. So after working for 5 years, I decided to join Lancaster University for the design management program. And following that, I kind of shifted towards branding and UI UX design. So right now I work as a design manager at a software startup based in Manchester.
Okay, fantastic. And I should have elaborated that you came specifically to do our master's program in design management, which is a kind
Yeah.
of figurehead of what we do in design here at Lancaster. Um, so what kind of things do you get up to day day in your job? Is it quite a general position?
Yeah, so I mean, it is a startup and I am the only designer there. So I think the job also varies a lot depending on what's happening. So like right now we're kind of the company is going through a rebrand, so that's what I've been thinking of right now. So I've been designing their brand, creating a sort of system, understanding a little bit about how marketing would work. So I mean, in that sense, I think doing this course also, you know, prior to this I would have probably just thought about design itself, but I think this course sort of helped me think about other aspects of the business itself and understand marketing and those things. So, yeah, I mean, I think my job role is a little general right now, and which is good because it lets me explore a lot of different avenues.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds very familiar. And to share a tiny bit about my background from 20 years ago, I was also working in a startup then, you know, it was a different technological era. But being a creative person in an organization like that is something where it's a really special time because you can take that kind of creative training and apply it to so many different things, whether it's marketing material or overall strategy or user interfaces and the product itself. And it's a
Yeah.
fascinating time. And I think it really highlights some of the unique power and the strength of being a designer in the 21st century. It's now no longer just about making something pretty or doing some typography. It's much more of a general purpose kind of role, I think. So I'm going to ask you a little bit about your dissertation and what you did here at Lancaster. And I think you have at some point in the conversation, have some slides that you want to share. So whenever it's appropriate to do that, do let us know. And maybe that's now. So
Yeah.
the first question is that the dissertation that you did was about how AI can support capital building through organizational functions in creative SMMEs. So could you talk us through a little bit about what you did and what the motivation was and what you found out? And just to clarify what SMME actually means.
Yeah. So, okay, so starting with SMMEs, I'm just gonna say SMEs now because it's easier to say. So they're basically small, medium, and micro size enterprises. So a medium enterprise so in the UK, government defines a medium size enterprise as that having a fewer than 250 employees. and micro businesses can go up to having fewer than 10 employees. So I was generally looking at smaller businesses because it's found that most of the creative industries are micro businesses. So that means they do have fewer than 10 people, because most of the time creatives start their own business. They don't start to become entrepreneurs, but it's more of finding a way to have your creative expression and doing that. And running a business is just something you have to do to make that happen, to have your own voice and have that creative expression. So, which is why I particularly wanted to look at creative SMEs, and I wanted to think of how they can be more sustainable. So sustainable not just in terms of environmental, but also financially sustainable. And one thing, so there was a French sociologist called Pierre Bourdieu. So he had a capital theory which talks about how all organizations or individuals have different capital or resources. So different types of capital. I'm just gonna share my screen. So if you can, are you able to see my screen?
Yeah, that's working for me.
Yeah.
And so I think everyone should be able to see it and it will be on the recording.
Yeah. So, so we talk about, so Bordeaux talks about how we all have and organizations have different types of capital. So it could be economic capital, which is all the financials and monetary assets you have. And then it could be the cultural capital, which is particularly important for creative industries because it's the creative knowledge and the expertise that you have. And then there's social capital, which is basically the relationships and networks that you have within a society. And then there's the symbolic capital, which is your status within the society. So what my research was looking at was how developing these different types of capital or resources can help you have a sustainable firm. And another thing that happens within organizations is that it has different functions. So, for example, for a creative industry, like one of the main functions would be the actual design or the product development, and other supportive functions are like human resources, marketing, business and financial management, and project management. But one thing that happens is because most creative industries are micro businesses, that means you have fewer than 10 people, you have shortage of time, shortage of manpower. So it's hard to do all of this. So my research aimed to look at how we can use AI to mitigate the shortage that you have so that you can basically develop these functions, and then these functions help you build capital, which in turn helps the firm grow or sustain itself. So um yeah, so that was essentially the idea, that I wanted to explore how can AI help you with different functions that happen within the creative industry itself. So what I did was I interviewed 17 professionals across architecture, branding, product design, publishing, UX at different levels. And based on these interviews, I analyzed and I understood how is AI being used, where do people want to use it, what challenges they face, and how they imagine what its future role and potential could be. So, and I feel like a lot of times what happens is you might do a dissertation and then it just ends up in your archive. So I didn't want to just have this research, but I wanted to develop some sort of framework and apply it to different industries. So then I created three fictional creative studios. One was a branding studio, one was a craft focused product studio, and another was an architecture and urban design studio. And then I kind of projected my findings onto these studios to help understand how could creative practices adopt AI.
Okay, that's amazing. It's such a cool project. And I think it's really nice to see how through the course you've been able to learn about different theoretical perspectives and research approaches and really put that into something that can be applied in the real world and is relevant to the real world.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear a bit more about these fictional studios. So how did that come about? What does it even mean? What is a fictional studio and how is it useful?
Yeah. So, pick, so based on, so as I mentioned, I wanted to understand how the insights would play out, and so I wanted to test it out on a firm itself, like some sort of design industry or a firm. But then I had some issues. Like I could not take an existing firm because the interviews that I did were, I had to maintain anonymity and I couldn't misinterpret real firms. So I didn't want to focus on a specific company that exists because that was one reason. Another was that the interview data that I got, it's rich, but it's also fragmented because like each participant would probably only see a slice of the organization. So what I did was essentially based on all the interviews that I did was form these three different studios which also helped me like recognize patterns across participants and kind of put it together in a coherent model. And the last was also it helped me see what the different types of creative work, how would it vary? For instance, if it was an architecture versus a branding studio, which also depends on the kind of work that they do. So yeah, I think that framework it helped me find apply my research based on three different distinct contexts within the design industry.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I really love to see how speculation and fiction can be brought into projects like this. Again,
Yeah.
it relates to my background where I did a PhD about design fiction. And within that, one of the ways of talking about it was to say that the beauty of speculative prototypes is that if you do them well and they're believable, then they actually have just as much power as a real case study or a real prototype. There's no difference if you're looking at it from the perspective of a researcher or a designer. So they're really a profound way of making a lot of progress very quickly. And I think looking at your project, I think that's what I think you were achieving through this use of speculation and these fictional studios.
Yeah.
Um, I I guess the next topic I wanted to touch on is more of a based on all of the interviews that you did and the broader piece of work. What's your perception of designers and AI? Are designers good at working with AI? Are creative people good at working with AI? And what more can we do in that space?
So I think designer designers are good at it because especially like in early stage creative tasks. So, if that's generating variations, combining styles, or quickly visualizing things, I think it works well because design itself is very iterative and explorative. So I think that way it kind of fits naturally. But I mean, so I guess the idea of my dissertation was not just to look at how designers use AI for design, because because that is our field of expertise. But then if you're a founder of a creative industry, you also have to think of the other aspects of your industry. So what I found was if you have to use AI for other uh, aspects like HR and business and strategy, people did tend to use it, but uh, for activities which were very low stake. So, for example, if it was something like drafting an SOP or summarizing meetings, they were okay using it. But if it was something that could actually affect contracts or like thinking about the business model, people kind of took their judgment over what AI would tell them. And another thing I found was that so a lot of other non-design industries do tend to use AI for these aspects. But the thing is, they also require a lot of back-end infrastructure and deeper automation that designers just don't really end up doing. So that is something that they could definitely explore. And another way is, I mean, apart from how it is used right now, which is like in the exploratory phase, another thing that I was looking at through my dissertation was a lot of people trust what AI gives them as long as they know where the data is coming from. Because, and I think that has a lot of opportunities. So, for example, like for design firms, our data is the intangible assets like our portfolios, client feedback, research, and even mood boards, and that all could be seen as data. And then you could maybe use AI to analyze it and spot patterns and maybe understand why you made certain decisions that you did, which could maybe even help you as a designer. And that's, I mean, in a way, I also use it in my work right now, where I create, like, if I'm doing a branding project, I kind of create a branding identity and create an entire design system and then feed that into AI and then generate content. So I guess in that sense, it gives me more control over what I am telling, what my data source is basically. So yeah, but I think overall a lot of designers do want to use AI, but at the same time it is also very intimidating and there's just so much out there that they don't even know where to begin or what actually works or doesn't.
Yeah, I think it's an absolutely fascinating time to be around at the moment with the broad spectrum of what AI is changing in the world, and that simultaneously the same technology, so these generative AIs in particular, is changing the nature of creative professions like design, but then also changing the much more process-driven business functions, more like HR. I'm particularly interested, and I wonder if this is something that you explored a little bit in your dissertation, in the crossover between the two there. So, was there anything in the data that you came up with, or is there anything that you've thought about since that would suggest that design training and that kind of creative mindset might be useful for people doing the more process-driven parts of businesses like HR if they're using AI, if you follow what I mean? Does the
Mm,
question make sense?
mm, so, okay, just to make sure I understood, are you saying that AI would probably have more value in things like HR, which are more process driven as opposed to design?
Well, I think I'm assuming that, and I think you were suggesting as well that businesses want to use AI for more process-driven parts as
Yeah,
well as creative
yeah,
parts.
yeah.
The question then is, does some sort of creative training or a design-like mindset, is that useful to help those people incorporate AI into those functions?
That is a good question. I I don't I'm not very sure actually if the design mindset helps. I mean, that is not really something that I explored, but I do feel that if, I mean, overall, if you had to use it for other things like HR, marketing, so you can use AI just for like a certain task, which is easier to do. But then a lot of, if you have to use it for business and strategy, you have to really invest that time to give so companies like consulting firms like McKinsey and all of those the big firms do use AI a little bit for their business and strategy, but they've also spent a large amount of time and resources to feed in that data, and they have a rich data source on which they can train the AI which can make decisions. But I do feel like for smaller, especially micro businesses, just having that kind of time and resources to invest to do that is difficult. So, which is why even in my dissertation, I was looking at simpler ways that companies can use, I mean, sorry, smaller industries can use AI, which is mostly for like task-based thing as opposed to creating an entire system which would require a lot of back-end infrastructure.
Yeah, okay, that makes complete sense to me and connects with quite a lot of work I've done as well, which I think there is value in imagining businesses which are kind of have AI orchestrating at a high level in some way as a super high level collaborator. That's one vision, and I can see value in it, but actually much easier to achieve in the short term and for quick wins that are probably more relevant for startups and SMEs. These just task-driven, specific, smaller use cases, I think, make more sense
Yeah.
without having to implement that huge infrastructure. So that I think is it's super relevant. And are you bringing this kind of mindset to your current role, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, definitely a little bit. But I mean, I think now when I'm back on the other side, like of the people I interviewed, like I do understand that apprehension and just general intimidation because there's just so much out there and there's no like set guideline on what to use and there's just so many tools. So I mean now I understand why it can feel overwhelming because even if I want to use AI for one particular thing and then I look it up and then there are like five different AI that do that one thing and then I have to sort it out. So, I mean, and that also makes me understand why, like, I mean, makes me rather appreciate that I did want to create a framework and apply it so that I would kind of know how to use it because you know that the research is there, but when you actually have to get into using it, it does get overwhelming at times.
Yeah, yep, that makes one hell of a lot of sense. I just wondered if you had anything to share about the two sides you just talked about. So the side of being a postgraduate student at Lancaster and being interested in research and the dissertation you made, and then the other side of being a person working in a business and trying to keep the business alive, make sure it's sustainable and grow and so on. So what what would you say you got from your time at Lancaster to help you prepare for being back on that business side? Was it overall a useful experience?
Yeah, I think definitely, as I mean, I was mentioning a little before, I think if I had, I mean, prior to doing this master's course, if I had to design something, I would probably just think of the design itself, but now it helps me think of, a larger idea, and it's also helped me with my research a bit. How would I start on projects? And a lot of times I also have to, do some workshops. So as I mentioned, the company I work with now, we are kind of going through a rebrand. So I had to do a naming workshop. And if I had done it before I had done my master's, I would not have known how to go about it. But I think during the master's course, because we had so many workshops and it was so hands-on that really gave me an idea of how to structure certain things, which definitely helped me at my work right now. And also, yeah, I mean, so I do a little bit of marketing and thinking about socials, and in a way, I also apply my dissertation sort of to what I am doing because now I don't only think of design as design, but I also think of it from a marketing perspective and thinking about the strategies when you're talking about a brand identity, your tone of voice, which also kind of goes on to the business angle. How do you want people to perceive you? So I think, yeah, it's given me a much more like holistic approach to how I would go about a project.
That's really rewarding to hear, because I think as a part of our project with design at Lancaster and the project of Imagination Lancaster, it really was exploring how design isn't always just about the outcome. It's not just about that. It's really a way of thinking. Holistic is the right word, a way of enabling more creative, more innovative ways of conducting ourselves in the world. So it's really wonderful to hear that you're putting that into practice through your role.
Yeah.
Um, I'm going to move back onto AI again.
Yeah.
And there's this really fascinating concept that you explored with the distinction between combinatorial creativity and transformational creativity. And I think one is something that humans are good at, and the other is something that AI can do a bit of. I just
Yeah.
wondered if you could talk us through that a little bit, and maybe talk about how this will have an impact on other future designers as they seek to develop their practice.
So Margaret Borden actually came up with the idea of combinational, exploratory, and transformational creativity. So combinational creativity is basically remixing patterns and generating variations that produce quick visuals. So it's basically taking from what is already there, which AI is good at. But transformational creativity is actually breaking all conventions and creating something so new that hasn't existed before. So, when you look at what creativity has been defined, like the earlier definitions of creativity focus on that creativity is just creating something that's novel. And then slowly it became that, okay, novelty plus it should also have some utilitarian value. And then finally it went on to creativity uh, began to emphasize not just on the output but also the process of creating. So so that's what we kind of think as creativity and design now, is that it's a series of decisions that you make and iterations and reflections, and there is some intentionality to it. So what I think right now, AI can definitely produce creative looking outputs, but it doesn't engage in that process of actually creating. So there's no intent and no cultural grounding. And because of the black box nature of AI, it means that designers don't have that opportunity to understand decision making and to reflect and actually choose. And sometimes it can even fill in gaps that designers didn't specify. So in a way, it's kind of taking away that choice that you would have had otherwise. So AI can, it is good for combinational creativity, but it can't do other, it doesn't have skills that I think people really need to have, like critical thinking, thinking in systems, having ethics, judgment, and cultural sensitivity, and also originality and actually having ideas and leadership. So, like, I think designers are really authors of meaning. So it's not just about producing an output, but it's also about the entire process itself, which I think AI is not good at right now. So I think as designers, those are like developing that critical thinking is really important. And that's what we can use to distinguish ourselves in this like world of AI slop right now.
I completely agree, and I think I'm a advocate of using AI, and I
Yeah.
think it has a lot of value, but that value only really makes sense if you put a lot of effort into your own practice to develop those creative skills that allow you to do transformational creativity and critical thinking. And yeah, it's fantastic to see that that came out through the interviews and through what you did in the dissertation as well.
Yeah.
Um, I think some of those phrases you use are really profound. So, design as authors of meaning, I think is really powerful. And also thinking of the black box effect as actually removing choices from
Yeah.
you as a designer, removing your agency. And we're at an inflection point right now where things are changing very rapidly. And it's through work like this that it's just amazing to see come out of your studies that slowly consensuses and new ways of understanding the world will emerge. So I think it's really, really powerful. I think we should probably lean towards closing. I was going to ask you another question about intellectual property and creativity and ethics, but I think we've touched upon that already, and we've
Yeah.
approached the kind of half an hour mark that we were aiming for this conversation. I suppose I have two further thoughts for you, and one is there anything else you want to tell us about or to mention? Because I've been leading you down particular directions, but if there's something you want to share, then please do. And the other one is this is the very first in this series of future design leaders talks. And what advice would you give to other future design leaders for the next generation? And why do you think that they should study design?
So, I mean, to answer your first question, I think we did cover everything that I had in mind. So, there's nothing in particular that I would like to add. But uh, to your second question about why should you study design? What is the I mean, there's a lot of studies that and I read online, especially on platforms like LinkedIn, about how you don't need designers anymore. But I strongly disagree with that because and I think especially for design leaders who are starting out, like though AI is so accessible, you still need to know the fundamentals. Like, I mean, so when, so McKinsey actually compared the impact of AI to the steam engine, the internet, and the smartphone. So all of these technologies really expanded human potential, but each of these still needed people who understood their craft deeply. So AI is the same. So it can help you with your early stage ideation, it can make teams more efficient, but you still need your own judgment, your own thinking, and your own point of view. So now I do feel because of AI, there has been like a democratization of design, and it's easier to enter into the design field. Which, so during my interviews, people also felt that this has also led to a dilution of design because there's a lot of focus on quantity over quality now because it's just so easy to produce a render or a mood board, and people mistake that for the creative process. But then, I guess jumping on to what I'd said a little before about how there are a lot of things that AI still can't do. Like it doesn't understand users, context, culture, and and doing the research about and thinking of things, as I mentioned before, from a very holistic perspective. So I think it's really important to study and understand those things. Look at what leaders in whatever your field is, what they have done before, and then sort of develop your own taste and judgment and values. So, if you're an architect, you still need to understand space, materials, and human behavior. If you're doing branding, you still need to understand the narrative, identity, and strategy. Like AI can help you amplify these things, but you still need to have your own thoughts and your own views. So, I mean, yeah, so I think this is what will differentiate you, and this is what value that you can add as a designer. So, and I feel like, especially in the beginning, it's really important that you understand these fundamentals, and AI can sort of assist you in doing it. And it also helps you understand what value AI adds, and also understanding when you should use it and when you should not use it. Because thinking about it from also a sustainability perspective, so there were some studies that found that A single AI query uses the 10 times the energy of a simple Google search. And even if you want to generate a 100-word AI email, you'll require half a liter of water. So also being intentional, like thinking, do I really need AI for this, or is this or is there just, maybe having an email template which makes it easier rather than using AI? So I think just being mindful about things is something as a designer and as anyone other you should be conscious of. And yeah, I mean, I guess it's just, if just because you can use AI for something doesn't mean you should. Yeah, I think I'd like to end with that.
Yes, absolutely. And we actually have a question from Tonya that I will ask you in a second, but I think there's a lot in your answer there, many different dimensions. But one of those things that really stuck with me is this idea of through practice and study and training and doing design, coming to your own thoughts and your own views, which I think you can get the most out of these technologies if you
Mm,
have that foundation of your own practice to
yeah,
build upon. And of course, that stretches over into the place that you ended up, so making responsible decisions about using these technologies as well.
yeah.
Let's quickly ask Tonya's question. It's a fascinating question. So Tonya said, I'm curious how AI would work with upcoming systems designers based around philosophical responses to the polycrisis and using AI to strengthen elements of traditional design. Now, this is a complicated question,
Yeah,
which, like my interpretation of what Tanya's getting at is, can AI be a tool for designers who really want to address these big interconnected wicked problems, and partly by helping us look back at philosophical ideas and look back at wisdom more critically, and not just kind of imagining um, the more traditional sense of design, as in we will look at a problem and solve the problem by designing a solution.
yeah.
Um, so what do you think? Can AI help designers engage with these philosophical, complicated, wicked problems?
I think, I mean, this is just my opinion, but I feel like if we can input the data, like whatever, if it's some sort of wicked problem, if we can get enough research and data and sort of input that into AI, but in a very restrictive manner. So, we have control over what data the AI is getting. I feel like it could potentially maybe come up with some solutions that we would not have thought of. So I think there is possibility, but yeah, I think that would also require a lot of agency from us itself to understand what data, what is the source that based on which AI is making those decisions.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there. And one thing I would say about it is, with really challenging, complicated, multifaceted problems, which often are part engineering problems or materials problems or economic problems or moral and ethical and so on. That wicked problems have all these dimensions, but until you can imagine it,
Yeah,
imagine a response, it's not really possible to make a change. And
yeah,
something that I think across many different dimensions, whether it's just having a concept for a new product or how you talk about something, or these bigger ideas, I think AI can be useful in helping us imagine different ways forward, but it's part of an overall portfolio where
yeah,
there's design and there's practice and there's multidisciplinary collaborations
yeah,
alongside. Um, I Because of the format of this, Tanya's asked another question but isn't able to speak, it's a little bit complicated. But I want to acknowledge Tanya said more so as someone newly coming to design with a background in social sciences, climate, political, and justice-seeking frameworks, is curious whether it's possible to rely on AI to fill in the gaps of traditional design, or if it still isn't evolved enough and would require a designer's knowledge. So, Tanya, from my point of view, that's a straightforward no. You can't rely on AI to do just that.
Mhm.
But I think for me, it's probably part of the mix. I don't know. What do you think, Sahana?
Yeah, I mean, I have to agree with you, Joe. I think that's what I was talking about, fundamentals. Like, I feel like if you need to have the fundamentals in design to understand, and you need to have that basic knowledge to understand whether what AI is producing for you is right or not. So if you don't know the basics, if you don't have that fundamental core knowledge, you will just assume that whatever AI is telling you is right. But so you won't be able to make a decision and judge whether it makes sense or not. So again, like coming back, I think whatever field it is, I'm not just saying that design in particular. I think in any industry, you need to know the core and understand that, because then you will have that level of expertise to evaluate the outcomes that AI produces.
Yeah, fantastic. Um, I see our conversation has encouraged people to start typing, which I think might be a couple more questions coming in. I'm also mindful to try and keep to the suggested time, which we've probably reached. So I'm just going to give it a second or two and see if the people typing are asking a question, because I don't want to ignore them. But we're also probably coming towards the end of this. But it's been a super, super engaging conversation. And to follow up, Tanya's response was, thank you for the clarity. I think they're trying to test the limits of how to push AI and what it needs to be learnt and studied experientially. Again, Tanya, from my point of view, this is what you're saying is very current with the research I'm doing at the moment. And a big part of that is that to understand what you can achieve with AI, you do need to engage with it experientially. So I think you're probably doing the right thing. And I think that's been supported in the discussion that I and Sahana have been having as well. It came out in her master's dissertation that practice is key to making sense of AI, and AI can help with practice. So they're in a kind of reciprocal relationship, but it does involve actually doing some fundamental work. It's not that AI is going to magically get to the solution. Let's quickly just ask this question because it's about your study. So did you do interviews with designers in SMEs, or was it with a more diverse group, and they wonder whether people from other backgrounds see designers using AI during creative practices? So I guess the first question is, did you only interview
Yeah.
designers or other
Yeah,
people?
so yeah, I mean, because of constraints of the time period of the dissertation, I did only interview designers, which I understand could also maybe focus on more on how design AI is used in design. But I think the next step of the study would definitely be to interview people from from the other functions. So, interview people in marketing, HR, business, which could also, and how they use AI, which would go much deeper and which would probably help me create a more holistic model of how you can use AI. So I think it would definitely be very useful to do that down the line and just get different perspectives, because right now what I have is from a designer's point of view.
Yeah, yeah, amazing, amazing. Um, well, we're getting lots of nice messages of thanks for the conversation. So thank you for the thanks, people. It's been a really wonderful conversation to have, and I think a great way to kick off this new series of talks on future design leaders. The thing that's really sticking with me, Sahana, is that phrase authors of meaning, and I think it's really powerful to think what it means to be a designer in the 21st century, surrounded by technologies like AI. So I'm going to take that away with me, and yeah, just thank you once again for coming back to talk to us at Lancaster. And sounds like you're doing amazing things. And check in another couple of years, maybe.
Yeah, thank you so much, Joe. It was lovely having this conversation. And it was nice to, get those thoughts flowing again and remind myself of what I've done and probably incorporate that a little bit more into my work.
Fantastic. All right. Have a lovely day, and thank you everyone for coming along.